Hello and welcome to Pixel Magic Tutorials. I am your host Geekman, and today we're going to learn how to create a sheet metal text effect in Photoshop. Now, a couple of assumptions I need to make right out of the gate. Number one, I am using Photoshop CC 2017, so if you're using an earlier version of Photoshop, some of the effects may not work as expected. Second, I am using Windows, so if you're using a Mac, when I say hit the Control key on the keyboard, that means hit the Command key, and when I say hit the Alt key on the keyboard, that means hit the Option key. So with all of that out of the way, let's get started by hitting Control N on the keyboard to bring up the new image dialog box. Let's name this Sheet Metal Text because that's what we're making. Our width will be 3840 pixels. Our height is 2160 pixels. Resolution of 150 pixels per inch. Color mode is RGB color 8-bit. Background contents don't matter. We'll change that real quick. Color profile is Adobe RGB 1998 and square pixels. Hit create and we now have our image started and ready to begin. Now, before we really begin on creating the background, which will be a simple gradient, and then the text itself, which will be done all in layer styles, the first thing that we need to do is make sure that our rulers are showing so that we can create guidelines to the very center of our document. So you want to make sure the rulers are showing. You hit Control R on the keyboard. That will hide them or show them, or you can go here to View and make sure that Rulers has a check mark. Once you can see your rulers, you want to click on the ruler itself and then drag down to the center of the document. It will snap into place and then you can let go. Do the same thing on the left-hand side and it will snap into place and then you can let go. And you now have a center point of your document from which we can make the gradient spiral out. Now, to make the gradient, the first thing that we want to do is we want to change our foreground and background color to the colors of the gradient that we're going to make. So let's click once on our foreground color, and let's change that to 0400E0, and that will give us a nice rich blue color. Then for our background color, click on that, and what we're going to do is a deeper color, and that's 00086F. And that gives us a richer, deeper blue, almost purpley-like color. Hit OK, and we now have our foreground and background colors for our gradient. The next thing we need to do is use our gradient tool. So let's hit G on the keyboard to bring up the gradient tool, or you can go over here to the gradient tool on your toolbar. Once you have the gradient tool, you want to go up to your gradients and you want to make sure that you choose the foreground to background. Now, if you don't see these because you've been following other tutorials or you've been using different gradients from your gradient chooser, go over here to the sprocket, go down here and say Reset Gradients. Once you do that, just hit OK, and it will reset to your gradients of foreground to background to invisible, and then black to white, and then you get the rest of these. But we want the foreground to background gradient. So once you have that selected, what you want to do is make sure that you are on radial gradient. Mode of normal, opacity 100%, reverse is unchecked, dither and transparency are both checked. Once that's set up, you go to the center of your document, click once, hold down Shift, drag out to the very end on the right or the left, and let go. You now have a nice kind of bluish radial gradient background to put your text on. Once we have that, we no longer need our guides, so you can go up here to View, you can go to Clear Guides, and the guides are now gone. Okay, now we have our background ready to go. We don't have to do anything else for a background because this is all about making sheet metal text effect in Photoshop, not making the background to put the sheet metal text on. So we are going to now pick a color for the text, and we're choosing a specific color because it will help the text look the way it's supposed to look, which is sheet metal text. So we want to go over here to our foreground color. We want to click once on there, and then we want to change this color to A8 ABDA, okay, which is a very light kind of bluish gray color. Then you want to hit OK, and we now have our foreground color set to the proper color. Then we want to choose a font. You want to go to your text tool by hitting T on the keyboard, And I am using a simple font, Arial Black. You can use whatever font you want, of course, but the best fonts to use are thicker fonts, hence Arial Black, because you want to be able to see the sheet metal within the outline that we'll put around the text itself. So a thicker font, a heavy font, or a black font, or at the very least a bold font you want to use for this effect. So you want to make sure that you're using a good font. My font that I've chosen is Arial Black, 235 points for this particular font, sharp, centered. The color has been picked up from our foreground color, so that's all good, and we are now ready to begin typing our text. I go somewhere near the center of our document, I click once, and then I'm going to type in my text, Pixel Magic. Now, as always, the kerning between letters is always a little bit wonky. So here the X and the E is very close, whereas the P and the I are very far away. So the way that we're going to fix that is we're going to put our text cursor in between the letters that we need to fix. Then you hold down Alt on the keyboard, and then you use the left and right arrows to make the kerning closer or further apart. So holding down Alt, I'm going to make the P closer to the I by hitting the left arrow key, and that will bring it closer. Then I'm going to do the same thing over here for the X. The E looks pretty good, but I'll make it slightly closer, and the L closer. That looks pretty good. I should make that a little, no, that's good. Okay, so then the M here, the A, we'll make that a little bit closer, the I, and the C. So that all looks good. Once you're happy with the way it looks, you hit the little check mark up there, and your text is now ready to be turned into sheet metal text. So before we do that, let's hit V on the keyboard and just move it to the center to make it easier for everybody to see. And now all we have to do is start putting on our layer styles. So the first thing that I'm going to do is make sure that my text is selected, and then I'm going to go down here to my layer styles, and I'm going to go first to blending options. And I'm going first to blending options, not because I have to do anything fancy, but just to show you that here under advanced blending, you can change the fill opacity. It's the same fill opacity that you see over here under layers, right? Fill. But we're going to just do it here because we need to do a lot of work here under the styles. So what we're going to do is we're going to change this to 69%. An odd number, I know, but I decided that that looked best, and it's my tutorial, so there we go. Now what we need is 3 strokes. So the first stroke, if you don't see more than 1 stroke, which you shouldn't, you just need to hit this little plus icon, and you will then have another one, and you hit it again, and you will have 3. And that's how you get more than 1 stroke on a piece of text. Now, I've already got mine set up, but if you wanted to, you could just hit the plus, and you'll see another one shows up, and you hit the garbage can icon here to get rid of them. So the topmost stroke that you have, what you want it to be is a size of 10. You want to make it position of outside, blend mode of lighter color, opacity is 50%, overprint is checked. Fill type is pattern, and the pattern that we're looking for is right here called primed linen, and you could find this under Artist Brushes Canvas. So you go to the little sprocket over here, and you go down to Artists Brushes Canvas, click on that, you hit OK, and then it will replace your patterns with these, and it's the 6th one over here, or the second one on the right, the second row on the right-hand side in this example here. So you click on that, that's the one that you want. Then the scale needs to be 50%, and link with layer needs to be checked. Next, stroke. The next stroke underneath the top stroke, you want this to be a size of 6, a position of outside, blend mode of color burn, opacity is 80%, overprint is checked, and the fill type is going to be a gradient. Now the gradient that you need is not found under your standard gradients. It's a metal one, so you need to click on the sprocket, go down here to metals, click on metals, and then hit OK. And then you will see this one right here, which is considered steel bar. That's the one that you need. Make sure reverse is unchecked, align with layer is checked, shape burst is what we're looking for, angle is going to be 90, and scale is going to be 100%. The next stroke that we need over here is going to be a size of 10. Position is going to be outside. Normal is going to be the blend mode. Opacity is going to be 100%, and overprint is checked. Fill type is going to be a gradient, and this is also a metal, so you don't need to change anything, and it's this guy right here, which is silver. Okay, reverse is unchecked, align with layer is checked, style is linear, angle is 90, and scale is going to be 110%. Okay, now we're all done with our strokes. Now what we need is 2 inner shadows. So click on inner shadow, then hit the plus mark there so that you have 2 of them. The topmost inner shadow, you want it to be a blend mode of multiply. The color that we're using is black. That's all zeros. It's going to be opacity of 100%, angle of 135%, distance of 5, choke is 10, size is 9. Contour is going to be linear, which is the very first contour right here. Anti-alias is checked, and noise is going to be 2%. The second inner shadow here is going to be a color dodge blend mode, and the color that we're using here is a very dark gray of 363636. Okay, opacity is going to be 100%. Angle is going to be 135 degrees. Use global light. I forgot to mention this before, but I always uncheck use global light. So in the first one here, you got to uncheck use global light. And I found that use global light is almost never useful unless you're working on something that you have to have every single effect has the exact same light source. And that is rarely, if ever, true unless all you're doing is drop shadows. So I always uncheck use global light. Where were we? Oh, yes. Angle of 135 degrees. Make sure that use global light is unchecked. Distance is 0. Choke is 0. Size is 200 pixels. Contour is going to be linear. Anti-alias is checked. Noise is 0. So that's it for our inner shadows. Next, we need an inner glow. So click on inner glow. And the blend mode that we're going to do is color dodge. Opacity is going to be 55%. Noise is 0. And the color that we're using here is a very light gray of D2, D2, D2. Okay, that's all D2, D2, D2. Okay, technique is softer. Source is going to be edge. Choke is 0. Size is going to be 8 pixels. Contour is linear. Anti-alias is unchecked. Range is 60%. And jitter is 5%. Jitter and noise are almost the same thing in these effects, but jitter is a little bit nicer for this particular effect that we're going for. The next thing that we need is satin. So satin will give us the kind of well, satin effect, but it's what gives the sheet metal kind of its shine that we're looking for in the sheet metal. So the blend mode is going to be multiply. The color that we're using is black, which is all zeros. Opacity is going to be 35%. Angle is 90 degrees. Distance is 50. Size is 80. And contour is going to be this guy right over here, which is called the rolling slope descending. Okay, if you don't see all of these contours, all you have to do is click here on the little sprocket, go down here and click on contours. Okay, and it will give you this very confusing little dialog box that says replace current contours with the contours from contours. Yes, you want to do that. So hit OK, and you will see all of these extra cool contours, which will become important, I believe, in the very next thing that we're going to put on. So just make sure that you find here rolling slope descending. That is the contour that we need. Anti-alias is checked. Invert is unchecked. The next thing that we need to do after our satin is we need to do a color overlay. So you want to do a blend mode of hue, and the color is black, which is all zeros, and the opacity is going to be only 50%. That darkens things up. The next thing that we need is a gradient overlay. So we're going to click on gradient overlay, and we're going to go to blend mode of hard light. Dither is unchecked. Opacity is 85%, and we are going to want this silver one again. Okay, reverse is unchecked. Align with layer is checked. Linear is the style. Angle is 90 degrees. Scale is 150%. Next thing that we need is we're going to want a pattern overlay right here. And the pattern overlay that we're going to want is a color dodge, opacity of 20%. And the pattern that we want is, once again, the primed linen pattern that we used before. You want to make this a scale of 75%. Link with layer is checked. The last thing that we need is 2 drop shadows. Okay, so we're going to click on drop shadow here. and it's going to be a blend mode of screen. The topmost one is going to be a blend mode of screen, and the color that we're using is this very slight bluish kind of gray, which is E6E9EE. And then the opacity is going to be 65%. Angle is going to be negative 45 degrees. Again, use global light unchecked. Never use it. I hate that. Distance is going to be 5. Spread is going to be 3. Size is going to be 25 pixels. Contour is going to be linear. Anti-alias is unchecked. Noise is going to be 3%. And layer knocks out drop shadow is checked. And the last thing, the last drop shadow is going to be a hard drop shadow underneath our text to separate it from the background. And we're using a blend mode of multiply. The color, of course, is black. Opacity of 100%. Use global light unchecked. And angle of 135. Distance is 17. Spread is 22. Size is 35. Contour is linear. Anti-alias is unchecked. Noise is just 2%. And layered knocks out drop shadow is checked. Once you have all of that, our sheet metal text is ready to go. Now let me zoom in on this just so you can see it a little bit better. Let me just click there. And this is what it looks like nice up and close. It's got a nice outline. It's got a drop shadow to separate the actual sheet metal underneath. And it's got that kind of shiny wiggliness that sheet metal usually has. So that is our sheet metal text. And as always, it is still fully editable text. So you can change the text, you can change the font, and the effect stays with it. I hope that you enjoyed this tutorial. If you did, please leave me a comment, give me a thumbs up, and subscribe. I do new tutorials every Tuesday. And once again, this is Geekman signing off for Pixel Magic Tutorials.